India has just declared its foreign policy for the 21st century. It's neither America nor Russia. It's an alliance with those who are paupers today but kings of tomorrow. Welcome to the new edition of WiseHeads. I am your host Ashish Shukla. In the G20 summit, African Union has been included at India's insistence. India is also championing Global South and euphemism for around 1 to 5 nations from Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe and Oceania. This Global South has huge problems. One, it groans under the debt burden of IMF or World Bank. The debt burden forces this Global South to part with its resources. These resources are then refined by foreign nations who claim profits up to 90% from the finished product. Two, the Global South is being forced to cut down on its agriculture because climate change activists claim that agriculture causes the most carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Thus, without control on its finances or food, the Global South dances around the little finger of rich nations or wet. If debt and climate change bogey doesn't bring the Global South to its knees, the rich nations resort to creating anarchy, injecting terrorists in the system and then plant their military bases under the pretense of providing security. All this ensures that the Global South remains shackled to the West. Lately, Global South is finding its voice and saying no more of this loot now. For example, in last 3 years, there have been 8 coups in Africa. Organizations such as BRICS are massively in demand as Global South realizes they need to throw off the yoke of the West. They also don't want to be forced into making a choice between the two superpowers, that is the United States or China. They wish to secure control of their land, resources, refining its finances and agriculture, but they struggle to find an easy way out of this labyrinth. This appears to them a never-ending darkness. These are problems which India has grappled for long too. But in the last few years, India's finances have improved magically. Its food output is so much that it could feed 80 crore Indians free as it did during the COVID pandemic. India has done so by digitally empowering its citizens, the direct benefit transfers, the simple, scalable innovations, which has made India the 5th largest economy of the world. India thus understands Global South and wants to champion its aspirations and provide solutions to its problems. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been vocal on behalf of Global South. India says, don't insist on a country giving up on its agriculture to help the climate change agenda if you can't compensate them enough with finances and technology. India has also been forthright to demand changes in how global bodies such as World Bank, IMF, or WTO work. These bodies basically carry out the agenda of US-dominated West. India says that unless these bodies are reformed, the Global South won't get justice. Let me give an example of how bad these global bodies are for Global South. Let's take the WTO. Now, the WTO controls all trade between nations. It insists that nations should do free trade without tariffs or subsidies and that doing so gives them unfair advantage over other nations. Yet this WTO has no problem when the United States issues food coupons and subsidies of over $100 billion to its farmers as it did in 2012. But when India tried the same, the US threw a tantrum saying it's a trade distorting subsidy. WTO, as you could guess, looked the other way. Similarly, WTO has now allowed other countries to raise tariffs against Russia for its being under sanctions of the United States. Now, WTO, a creation under the UN Charter, can't make such a political decision for its 164 member nations. But it still has made a political decision which makes it look a doormat of the US-led West. Apparently, nobody could bell this cat. Let's talk of agriculture, food without which humanity and nations can't live. Now, under the bogey of climate change, nations are being pressurized to develop their crops, only those crops which are environmental friendly, whatever that means. It's easier said than done. It would make nations become dependent on big multinational global agri companies. This year, We hear of lab-created food or meat, never mind its own FDA reports say chemicals in such food could cause cancer. The greed of rich gives a damn if billions of people die out of hunger or pestilence. The more vulnerable they get, the better it becomes for the West to control them and take hold of their resources, finances and food. India today says this cannot go on, that the global South must have control on their own destiny, and that global bodies must give an equal voice and representation to everyone and not just to the West. India is also offering its model for the global South to empower themselves. Its digital use to create a cohesive society and simple, sustainable model holds massive appeal to the global South. This would allow global South to avoid the difficult choice of choosing between the United States and China. The global South thus becomes the third vector in international politics. India acquires the leadership of this global South, which could force the superpowers to remain honest. It could force a change in the international system, which presently is rigged in favor of rich nations. The world becomes a more equitable, fair playing field, and India would earn the humanity's gratitude. Its G20 theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future suddenly acquires a profound meaning. It would ensure India remains a major power, unlikely to be bossed around by biggies, and its growing trade would only help its status. This is India's foreign policy for the 21st century, independent, neutral, and a voice for embattled global South. That's all in today's edition of WiseHeads. I'm your host Ashish Shukla, now bidding you goodbye. Please do like and subscribe our channel. WiseHeads exists on your attention. We meet soon with another burning geopolitical issue of the day. Till then, bye-bye.